Not very long ago it seemed to me that talking actually improved my lungs. It doesn't anymore. Well, so now the debate is once again the Rad Fem one, re-prostitution. What amazes me about these women, blast their eyes and damn their souls, is that they have the nerve to write essays and books about prostitution without ever so much as having known or spoken to a prostitute. In other words, they totally ignore the views of the women who are involved, except those who grasp that straw and say, "Oh yes, 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 I'm out of it now, and of course every time I had a client it was rape." And don't get me wrong, I have got nothing whatsoever against prostitution. In fact, I've been one, which is why I have strong feelings about it. Let me see. This certainly helps me to differentiate between trafficking and prostitution. My father passed me around his friends. The only visitors we ever had were complete and utter strangers, whom we had never seen before, or I'd never seen before, and never saw again. One of them took me out with my father on my 8th birthday. I don't particularly want to remember any more than that. I do, but I'm not going to talk about it. Well, it started out okay. They took me to see the Round Table in Winchester. What was really odd about that was that the guest was the first black man I'd ever met in my life at, let's say, 8th birthday, 1962. Very tall man called Tim. And, let's say, never saw him again. Not that I cared. Oh, I'm a little bit curious about... I wish I'd pushed when I was still speaking to my brother. I vividly remember a man called Teo from somewhere on the continent of Asia visiting us in what we called the Old Bungalow. I would have been between 4 and 6. I can remember everything about that evening. It's the only clear view I have in my mind of the sitting room, and this yellowing lamp, or lampshade. And my brother said, "I was surprised, do you remember Teo?" This is the same brother who says that his entire childhood was lived in a trance-like state, and who now has no memory of his adulthood either. But we both remember Teo. And we both remember a silly little incident when I was playing with my dolls in the front porch, and my mother apparently sent him to play with me, a fact he resents to this day. So I don't know whether to count Teo or not. Suffice to say, it was memorable. Then there was Tim. Then I think it was his friends the Cullymores he brought, a married couple, and the man burned my hand. They brought this enormous Spanish doll with coiffed powdered hair and makeup, and oh god, she was about 4 feet tall and no chance of playing with her. She wound up in the attic. That also was memorable for all the wrong reasons, and they never came again. He does, however, speak of them in letters, or at least he speaks of John Cullymore, who he was at a time when John Cullymore was living in Uxbridge, and my father was writing from Uxbridge, place from where Robin John Stoddart originates. There were others. So child prostitute is it's an oxymoron. You can't be a prostitute if you're a child. You don't know what it is. You don't know what you're doing. I didn't know the doll was payment for anything. I didn't know the box of chocolates that Tim gave me was payment for anything. I thought it was a birthday present. Now that is trafficking. In the case of Tim, I was transported away from home with only him and my father on my 8th birthday. Well, it might have been the day before. I think the birthday fell on the Sunday and it was the Saturday. I know that on my 8th birthday I could not do the twist, which was the popular dance at the time. I actually did have a birthday party, complete with my little friends, of course. They could do it and I couldn't. I just could not move my hips. I also remember an occasion sitting outside school on a sort of platform in the courtyard, sitting outside the classroom, with an absolutely agonizing pain in what I could only describe at the time as my stomach. It was internal. Agonizing. Never forget it. I was looking at this little brownie pamphlet that I'd been issued, well, when I joined the Brownies. So that's trafficking. That's, of course it happens to adults too, and it's when you're moved from one place to another, or people are introduced into your life, and you're forced to have sex with them against your will. That's trafficking. I could say the same happened to me in 82 and 83, as a matter of fact. Although there was an element of consent on my part. Because had I not done it, our rent would have gone unpaid, our bills would have gone unpaid, we would have been evicted, my daughter would have gone unclothed and unfed. I really had no choice at all. And for those who say, why couldn't you go out and get a proper job? Because, well, if you've listened to any of these videos, you know that I didn't have the qualifications for a job, any job, and wasn't really well enough to do any job either. Any normal job, that is. I mean, any woman can have sex at any time, pretty much. I couldn't now. It would kill me. It would just crush the breath out of me, end of story. I wouldn't even consider it. But if you're young and healthy, no matter what ails you mentally, you can do that particular job. Whereas you can't go out and, be a doctor or a surgeon or even... I was a barmaid for a while. That didn't work out because I hated being with people. That sounds like a contradiction. If you're behind a bar, you're in a situation where you actually have to converse with people up to a point, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it unless I was drunk. And of course, pubs don't employ drunk barmaids, generally speaking. I couldn't talk to people unless I was drunk for a long, long time. You don't have to talk to a punter much. Well, it helps if you can. But a punter who's been introduced to you without your say-so, without your ever having spoken to him before, without you having a clue what he wants, what he likes, what he's going to do, you don't really have to converse with him very much. That was the situation in 82 and 83. After I'd been told I couldn't do modelling work in my own home unless I wanted to lose custody of my daughter. So the great thing about Pagham in 82-83 and Ken Browning, who owned the place, was that a great arrangement between him and my parents. They still got my daughter 2 days a week or 3 days a week because she had to go to them while I went to Pagham to work. And had I not done that work, we would have been homeless. Simple as. So that was kind of a mixture of coercion and necessity. And I hated every single second. Every single second. Couldn't do it sober. Had terrible panic attacks and hyperventilation and what have you and so forth. Tried to drive the car off in the middle of the night, notwithstanding that I've never learned to drive. Never been back to Packham. Hate the place. Hated. Nice little seaside place, I think. And family connections to it. I have no. It's not on my bucket list to go back. So that was kind of a mixed thing. I could almost subscribe to the Radfem view that there was an element of rape there. Because I didn't have a real choice. Certainly no choice in the who, or the what, or the when. None at all. And Ken, dear Ken, my friend, of course, took commission, which meant that I made just enough to cover the necessities and the booze that I needed to do it. Well, I was well glad to get the hell out of that. And in fact, I got pregnant very deliberately with my husband to get out of it. Very definitely my husband's, and you're both welcome to do the DNA test, but it's pretty obvious. And to me it's very obvious, because she was conceived after my last booking and after a period, i.e. in the period of time after the period. So that had happened after my last booking. So there was never any doubt in my mind that I was making sure that it was my husband's child. Oh, he was around when he wanted to be, back and forth between his mother's place and my place, never working, ever. Except for 6 months at Schiphol Airport, which was arranged by Edmund Hutter, a very, very wealthy friend of my parents. And I thought of me. Well, multimillionaire. I could have been his little wife at a price. I didn't want to be. I don't know how I reconciled it all. I have no idea. There must have been a lot of cognitive dissonance, and hence the alcohol, because I was still in love with my husband, who beat the shit out of me, by the way, and didn't work, as I've said. I was still in love with him, and I didn't want to be anyone else's little wife. Really a lot easier, wouldn't it? Because I was offered a certain sum of money for that. A specific sum of money. And I'd have only had to sleep with a guy 50 years older than me. Just the one. It was against my code of honour at the time. Which was a little confused, I suppose. You see, I was pretty much out of it for many, many years. And then, after my degree, when my first class degree and my computer literacy and all the other qualifications that I had managed to gain had only got me temp jobs, and the temp jobs had run out. Funnily enough, a guy who knew Greg Byworth got back in touch with me at precisely that vulnerable moment in time. It was vulnerable for a lot of reasons, actually. Not that that matters. At first I said no, and then I said yes. So I was a paid mistress for quite a while. And that paid the bills as well. Can't say it didn't matter to me. It did matter to me. But at least I had the facilities by then to have a shower every time he left, you know. There wasn't always a shower in my flat. Just one man. I don't really care about it. One way or another anymore. It was a choice. And then there came a time after I got to Wales when my girlfriend had abandoned me within 2 months of my arrival. And I had a bad experience with a man, and then rapidly followed by a bad experience with a woman, a mental health nurse who fisted me against my will. And money came into both those things, not of my choice. The man offered me a sum of money. He was an ex-priest and an old friend. He offered me a sum of money more or less to shut up and forget about it. And I refused it. Funnily enough. And then this bloody woman, Nat, the mental health nurse, after she'd fisted me, left a 5p tip on my tall boy in my home. Well, let me see, that was by then June 2005. And I did have financial difficulties by then because in November 2004, my daughter had got in touch and said, "Would you like to see the children?" And I hadn't seen them since 2002, so the answer was yes. Well, it would have been anyway. But that entailed travelling back and forth to Southampton and finding somewhere to stay while I was there. I couldn't stay in her home because of my son-in-law. Fact. Perfectly welcome there until October 2002, then suddenly not. After I told my daughter that I had been raped by a man named Kema Sumra, who happened to be a Muslim, and who used taqiyya to good effect. Told her about that, lost both daughters for telling. Still don't understand that one. Please explain it to me. November 2004, by then I'd had a dog for 3 months as well, so there was also kennel fees to consider. As I say, the train journey to B&B, you're not going to go for a night, you know, not really, and then travel back, and I couldn't afford it. So come July 2005, I put an advert in the Yellow Pages, which was very clearly, Yellow Pages was pimping, simple. Obviously you had to pay for the advert, and if you saw the adverts, there was no doubt at all what services the women were advertising. So I thought, all right, let's give it a go. By then I was, 51, and I didn't think I would make it a penny. I didn't even think I'd get an answer. In point of fact, I got hundreds and hundreds of answers. So many I could barely keep track. Well, I couldn't keep track. My mobile phone was going off all the time. All the time. And my original intention being simply to make enough to go to Southampton, I found I could make over £600 in a day with very little effort. Not particularly pleasant, but very little effort, and by then I could do it sober as well because it was on my terms. I could pick and choose I could hear the guy's voice over the phone. I could make an informed judgment about what kind of man he was and what he wanted, and so on and so forth. It was entirely on my terms. I felt in control of that situation. I did speak to a woman in Southampton. Well, of course I used contraceptives, condoms, but I also got regular checkups when I went to Southampton. And this woman there was very concerned about my safety. And there was definitely an element of danger. I could have been beaten up, I could have been killed, anything. But the sight of my dog in her basket seemed to give most men pause for thought. She used to just lie there very, very quietly, and nobody could tell that actually she was the most gentle dog in the world and wouldn't hurt a soul. She looked as if she could spring up any minute and rip their throats out, which is laughable if you knew the dog. But it was useful. It was useful to have a dog. It was also quite useful to limit the hours and know that although I had no neighbours opposite, I did know that people could see the men coming and going. And they were nosy enough to notice if the man had left, dripping blood or whatever. 5 years. And a good deal of travelling, thank you very much. One client suggested it. I'd never expected to make that kind of money, ever. Ever. I thought I'd fallen into a gold mine. Okay. In my 50s. If I could turn back the clock to that time, I would. One client said, I know another woman who does that. She travels the world. And I thought, what a good idea. I'm earning far more money than I actually need. Good God. I mean, I was walking to the bank quite often with thousands of pounds to pay. Nobody ever commented. It was extraordinary. At the point I'm making is that there is trafficking, which is what happened when I was a child. There is a kind of a mix, let's say, in 82/83 of, yes, it felt like rape. And then there is what I did voluntarily in my 50s. And I don't regret a second of it. Oh, I've been punished by ostracism and all kinds of other things. But I worked well within the law. People are mistaken when they say prostitution is illegal. In this country, it is not. Soliciting is illegal. Well, technically, of course, you're doing that when you put the advert in. But technically, the people taking the advert were pimping as well. Because you're not supposed to make money. You're not supposed to make money from other people's prostitution. You also can't run a brothel. A brothel being defined as anything with more than one woman in it. So I turned down offers from other women to work together. The last one I think has more to do with a client. He's not supposed to curb crawl. So I was obeying all the laws. I was within the law. Of course, we got around. And yet I still had a lot of friendly people in that place. A lot of very friendly people. Anyway, This is a very long 2 halfpence worth on my contribution to this debate. And I would appreciate that you don't write essays about me without asking me first. And I know that everyone else who's ever been in the profession feels the same way, so do not call yourself a feminist without taking on board the views of the women who've done the work. And don't say it's not work, it bloody well is work. It's hard physical work, trust me on this one. It's also extremely unpleasant work. And very smelly work. Amazing how many people... farmers were often good clients because they've always got the money, but they came straight from the farm stinking of Christ knows what. But the best money was in the people who were passing through and just wanted a quickie there and then. They wanted it now, they wanted it quick. Came and went, and sometimes would only stay 10 minutes. Like £100 for 10 minutes. I'm just going to turn your nose up at that. Really, truly, be honest. The vast majority of men that I've met say that if they were women, they would be prostitutes. So don't take from me my freedom of choice, and don't take from me the best time I ever had in my life. I'm not ever going to apologise for it. And I have been well punished for it, but of course not by the police, because it's legal. As I did it anyway. I'm still being punished for it. I think it's part of the reason I'm not getting the medical treatment I'm due for, really. But what I was finding in radical feminist groups was that the minute you said, I've done this work, and trust me, it is work, and I chose to do it, and it wasn't rape, you're thrown out of the group. So these people who claim to represent their own sex do not. They do not. And as I say, I've written a lot of essays in my time, a hell of a lot of essays in my time, bloody good essays, well-researched, thoroughly researched essays, for which I got firsts almost every time. But I never wrote an essay about other human beings without hearing their side of the story first. Never. And you've got a fucking cheek to do it.